Perfect. So hello, everyone. My name is Lisette Garza. My pronouns are she, her. I am the director of Penn First Plus Alumni and Career Resources Initiatives. It is a pleasure to be with everyone today. Feel free to use the chat box, as Toyce was encouraging us all, to introduce yourselves, where you're coming from, what the temperature is like where you are, but also to interact with our speakers and others. Feel free to write in questions or comments throughout. We love interacting via chat. The Penn Flash Presents program today is an ongoing series with the purpose of creating connections between alumni and students through storytelling and knowledge sharing. Today, we will be speaking to alumni and students about their experiences in navigating the professional and academic environments as FGLI. And we refer to FGLI as LGBTQ and FGLI. And FGLI, for everyone here who might not know, stands for First Generation and or Lower Income. Our speakers will share their stories and knowledge on the subject as a way of creating community and giving support to our Penn Flash users. We hope you will join the conversation by entering your questions or comments in the chat box throughout our program. The first part of our program will feature a moderated discussion with our alumni speakers, led by our students. The second part will have a Q&A segment with you, our participants. We have muted everyone's mic except for our speakers today. You may unmute yourself during the Q&A if you'd like to ask your questions directly. Please note that this program is being recorded. This moment, I'd love to introduce you to our alumni speakers, and I'll ask each of you to wave or just say hello so that we can easily identify you in the Brady Bunch screen. We have Ernest Owen, pronouns he, him. He is a graduate of 2014 college, and he majored in communications. He is also an award-winning journalist and a writer at large for Philadelphia Magazine and CEO of Ernest Media Empire, LLC. Can you wave, Ernest?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. So we also have Aaron Kim, pronouns they, them. Aaron is a graduate of the engineering school and majored in computer and information sciences. They are now a senior software developer based in San Francisco. Hi, Aaron.
Hey, everyone. It's morning here for me in the Bay Area.
What's the temperature?
I think it's a cool 70, 60 right now. That's really
Looks
nice.
great. Thanks for joining us. Thank you both for joining us. In just a moment, our student moderators will be asking you all to share more about yourselves. Before we do that, I would love to formally introduce everyone to our wonderful MC, who we all got to experience earlier, Toyce Holmes, who is a FGLI program coordinator at the Greenfield Intercultural Center. Toyce will be introducing our student moderators.
Hi, everyone. Hello. It's good to see everyone's face. Again, my name is Toyce. My pronouns are she, her, hers. It's my honor and privilege to recognize and introduce two of our student leaders of FGLI, James and Cam. James just recently was the brilliance behind starting a FGLI fall activity fair, or excuse me, fall organization fair. So I enjoyed working with him. And then Cam's been on somewhat of a speaking tour promoting Truman Scholars, because Cam is a Truman Scholar. So I'll go ahead and let them take it away with their introductions. Go ahead, James.
Hi, everybody. My name is James. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm one of the co-chairs of FGLI. I'm a senior undergraduate at Penn, and I study biology. So thanks, everybody, for coming. And Cam?
I'm Cam. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am the other co-chair of FGLI, and I'm also a senior, but I'm studying PPE, which is philosophy, politics, and economics. So thanks for being here.
All right, thank you, students. And with that, I'll let you take it away. Go ahead, James.
Great, thank you so much, Toyce. So we are all excited to be here, and we're excited to have Ernest and Aaron here. So I guess just to sort of start us off, Ernest and Aaron, could you describe your journey from Penn to where you are today in a nutshell? So feel free to describe your experience as a first gen and or low income student. And Aaron, we'll start with you, if you could.
Sure. About how much time do we have for this question?
However long you think you need to answer the question.
Okay, sure. I think that journey from Penn to where I am now, I think I vastly underestimated the importance of the interviewing process and the whole recruiting process. I didn't pay too much attention to it while I was in college, and I didn't really understand the importance of it. I also didn't have the best grades, so I came out of college kind of unemployed, kind of not knowing what I was going to be doing. And so it took about a year until I was able to finally find a job, and it was largely tangential to what I actually wanted to do. I wanted to be a software engineer, and I landed my first role as a support engineer. It sounds really grim and scary, but it ended up turning out for the best. I think that the first 3 years of my career were really formative for me. I had great mentorship, and I learned a lot. I was kind of like in sponge mode, trying to soak in as much as I could. I think 3 years later, I think the script completely flipped. When I left my first job, it was at a tiny startup with 10 people. I had like recruiters all over me, which was a totally new experience for me. I had been used to kind of doing all that outreach myself. And then I finally landed myself at Blue River, where I currently work, which is a machine learning computer vision company in agriculture. And the people are great. My manager's been great despite all the pandemic stuff. So yeah, that's how I got here today.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And Ernest, would you like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey has been quite the roller coaster. I started off 10 years ago, actually, in Philadelphia, attending Penn. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. I was born in Chicago. When I came to Philly initially, I was a political science major. That was my aspirations. I was going to do political science and PPE. But shortly within the first like 2 weeks I was here on campus, I got involved with a radio station called WQHS, which is still here at Penn, I believe, and did a radio show that was actually started 10 years ago on this very weekend, actually. It was from Saturday from 8 p.m. to 10. And it was called Earnestly Speaking, and I really fell in love with doing it. And my interest really shifted from political science in the route that I was going to be a political science, do law, be a lawyer, run for office. Like that was the track I was initially going to go. And then I fell in love with, doing this radio show, and then started to do writing on campus with the Daily Pennsylvanian, and did internships and really pursued this media arc. Declared my major as communications in my sophomore year, and really just kept pursuing that on campus and then through internships. And it wasn't easy because I was specifically interested in talking about issues on campus that were not necessarily the desirable things that Penn wanted to talk about, but they were the things that need to be talked about. And I really thrived in really beginning to understand my identity and who I want to be in media, and also as I went through my own career interests, and really steering away from what was this very OCR culture that is still on Penn's campus, this very consulting-based culture that they try to infringe upon folks, and really want to navigate and create my own personal brand through my storytelling and through the interests that are around me, both on campus and off, both on campus and off campus. And that passion really drove me to continue to pursue journalism right out the gate, out of undergrad. And 10 years later, I'm still doing it, and doing pretty well, if I say so myself.
Awesome. Thank you both for sharing, Aaron and Ernest. And just a quick reminder for our audience, please feel free to enter your own thoughts or questions you might have in the chat box, and we'll get to them during the Q&A interactive session. But so our next question, Ernest, so you graduated in 2014. Did you face any struggles as a Penn student while you were here?
Where do I start? Yeah. Yeah, more than I would have imagined early on. I actually wrote about this for Philadelphia Magazine. There's a piece called a Black Face in a White Space, My 4 Years at Penn. And I delved deeply into this. I wrote this back in 2017, and it's all on the internet. People read it, won a lot of awards, and I spoke about that experience. But I think to sum it up in a nutshell, I think one of the biggest things I weren't prepared for when I came to campus is one is this, we all talk about the academic rigor. We talk about the competitiveness on the academic front and that angle, but we really don't delve deep into the socioeconomic division that I think fuels a lot of the other issues on campus. And so I was someone that was not from, the Northeast, did not have any family or direct connections or anything like that when I came to Penn. Like I came to Penn, pretty much like by myself. My mom and my folks brought me here, and my first day on Penn's campus was the first day of student move-in. Like I didn't do the tour. I didn't do any of those things. I didn't do Africana weekend. So when I came, one, because we were like, look, I can't afford to keep flying back and forth between Houston and Philly. So my first time on Penn's campus was literally the first day of NSO move-in. I had never been to Philadelphia in my life. I didn't know anyone. And it took time to adjust to understanding a lot of the things they don't tell you about financial aid. Like, yes, you can get your tuition paid for. Yes, you can get a meal plan. But we don't talk about what it feels like to be in situations where people got a lot of money and they're going off to Cancun for spring break. They can do unpaid internships. They can afford to do all types of stuff that for many of us who were coming in as first generation students, we didn't know. And so it was about navigating the nepotism, the classism, the privilege, and dealing with those intersections, especially as someone who was openly gay and queer on campus. Like it was never, I experienced racism in the LGBTQ community on campus. I experienced homophobia within, communities of color in certain groups. And understanding intersectionality, understanding how identity plays within that on the layers of class and wealth and who has and who has not. Those were the things that I had to experience for those 4 years to understand it. But I think the most important thing and the more inspiring aspect of that is that on Penn's campus, you're not alone with your thoughts. There are people who can relate. And so one of my biggest successful moments was being able to find community from different people in different walks of life, even if it was 10 or 5 people. For me, I found my fiance on Penn's campus. They also are Penn alum, and we're getting married next year. My best man and my maid of honor and my man of honor. My maid of honor went to Penn. She lived right across from me in my dorm room. Like half of my fiance's wedding party went to Penn, and we built a friendship and support system on Penn's campus. And it was because we just was authentically ourselves, but it was also just find the people you rock with. And so I always tell a lot of Penn students that yes, get that GPA, pass your classes. That's also important. But really get serious about making some real lifelong connections, because when you graduate, I don't remember the exams. I don't really remember all the papers, but I remember the memories and the friendships I have and continue to still have to this very day. And so I think that's the more valuable thing. I walked out with a degree, but I also walked out with a ring and some best friends for life.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think a lot of that, I think that resonates with a lot of us here.
Yeah.
What about, so Aaron, you're also a 2014 graduate, but in a different major. So what about you? Like, how are your, did you face any struggles at Penn while you were here too?
Yeah, a lot of Ernest's experiences are actually a lot
Right.
similar to mine. I
Yeah.
came from a pretty big public school in Los Angeles. And so coming from public school, I think the biggest challenge coming to Penn is that I was just wildly unprepared for the rigor. Not just for like the classes and stuff, but just flat out the preparation that some people had. I joined the rowing team while I was at Penn, and that's a particular. I noticed particularly the class differences. Rowing tends to be a upper class kind of white sport. Everyone there comes from private schools and long, and usually legacies, things like that. And so you can really witness the difference in like how they approach things and how they think about classes and how they think about like professors and everything. It was a very different experience to me. And I also kind of, I remember distinctly my roommate at freshman year, he participated in one of the summer programs at Penn. And so he came into Penn with like a ring of like really close friends that they had just like really bonded over the summer and like really got to know each other. And it was totally different from me because I kind of came to Penn, and I like NSO was also my first time at Penn. It was my first, besides the student tour, the student tour that I did before I got accepted. So I think that coming in without any support network was actually kind of hard on me. I remember struggling quite a bit in school and kind of feeling like everyone had already made their clique, everyone had made their friends already coming in. So it was a struggle in the beginning. I think my freshman year was one of the most difficult years of my life. And I generally remember Penn as an extremely humbling experience. But I think that the takeaways though is that I wish in retrospect that I hadn't stressed so much, that I had learned to let go a little bit, because I think it does end up working for the best. You make a lot of relationships and you come out of college kind of better for it all. It's very type 2 sort of fun.
Thank you so much for sharing. So I guess sort of jumping off of that question, how did you two go about forming your own community at Penn? Like, how did you make a space for yourself? And we'll start with Aaron this time.
Yeah, so I was like fiercely introverted in always. I think that in high school, I kind of knew everyone since I had been a kid, maybe second or third grade. I grew up with these people, and so there was never like any of that awkwardness meeting people. But I did feel that at Penn. It was the first time that I had to actually go out and be proactive about meeting people and making friends and trying to be involved in my community. I ended up leaning into what I did in high school. I was in athletics in high school. I played a lot of tennis. So that's kind of what led me to join Crew at Penn. And I think joining Crew helped facilitate a lot of that community making, community bonding. So I think a lot of my time ended up being juggled between school and Crew. It's very demanding being a student athlete in general. So I think that that's kind of where I found my niche. I hadn't really figured out my gender identity back then yet. I think that was something that I did towards the end of college, even like started asking myself like genuine questions about that sort of stuff. So I wasn't really involved in the LGBTQ community at Penn, and I wish I had. I wish I had made those connections and kind of like talk to someone about it all. But it's a little hard to be honest. It's a little hard to, especially when I happen to have chosen a very white, straight, heteronormative like community to join. But yeah, I think that I think those friends have been some of the most understanding friends that I have. So it turned out for the best.
I think for me, it was a lot different. I kind of jumped into everything full throttle. I came from a really big high school, public school in Houston, 1,000 kids in my graduating class. And I was Mr. Overachiever. I was class president, I was valedictorian, I just did everything. And so I kind of came into Penn with that same kind of energy, but definitely had a lot of road bumps because of just the nature of people. People were racist, people were homophobic. And it was weird because in my public school, I was definitely out in my public school, and everything was just like the sky's the limit. That was the vibe that I had when I was in high school. Like, it was a predominantly Black and brown high school. And so, you just kind of just, you could just apply for stuff and just go for it. That was like my energy when I was in high school. When I came to Penn, I started to get the questions of, well, why are you doing this? And why are you applying for this? And, it was, I dealt with imposter syndrome for like the first 2 years because of the fact that I was getting questioned for everything I wanted to pursue and do. And it wasn't until I started to really get deep into critical race theory. And really, it's funny because the academics is what you go there for. And then it's academics that sustain your knowledge about the society you're in. And so Penn is really it was a case study in a sense where if you wanted to see the most extreme levels of wealth, segregation, homophobia, liberalism, neoliberalism, all of those things combined, Penn was like the pressure cooker. And I always tell a lot of people who graduate that the world does not look or feel like Penn. And that's in good ways, that's in bad ways, but the world isn't as intense in that type of way. Most people are a little bit less pretentious. Most people tend to mind their own business. And most people tend to have other things they're thinking about outside of what we were dealing with in those 4 years. And so I know there's that corny saying, it gets better by Dan Savage, but it's been 10 years and I can say that it does get a little bit better in certain aspects of socializing. I think I appreciate what the things I've learned from Penn, but I also appreciate that the environment into which we thought was adulthood was really not adulthood. It was something else. It was preparation for the real world, but it wasn't the real world. And so I always tell students on campus, if you're feeling, out of place, understand, especially, we say at Penn, Fig Leaf students, first generation, most of the country is lower income. Most of the country is first generation. Most of the country aren't necessarily getting tons of degrees and living with wealth. What we have at Penn is this interesting place for opportunity and promise, but it's also unrealistic in scope and scale. And so I always tell people that's like us, that when we graduate, we become the normal. We become folks that can take some of the information back to our communities and really build from there, rather than feeling like, there is this reality. That's not the real world. Penn isn't the real world. It prepares you in some ways to understand it. As a journalist, I have become very woke on classism and racism in ways that before I went to Penn, I would have never really understood as much. And so it was a wake-up call. But the good thing is that there are more people that can relate to your experiences as first-generation students and lower-income students in comparison to a lot of the differences at Penn. So at Penn, every rich girl is wearing what? Tory Burch flats, Hunter boots, rose gold Michael Kors watches they were wearing, those ridiculous overpriced black bomber jackets with the fur things. That's what everyone wears on Penn's campus, right? Right? And then the reality is that when you walk out of Penn's campus and you actually go to Philadelphia, no one's doing that like that. They're mostly wearing Timberland boots like I was when I was in school. They were mostly just making it through, okay? And I think that I encourage a lot of you all, and one of the things that made me love this city was that when you step out of Penn, that's the reality. And that's what made me stay in Philadelphia, was that I fell in love with the Philadelphia city overall, because there was so much realness and understanding about what Penn's role was to West Philadelphia, but also what the real world really is. And so I would encourage people, especially first generation students, if you want to really reconnect with your experiences from home and just be around different people and different perspectives, take advantage of this city. This is the second largest city on the East Coast, next to New York City. Like, go out and meet people. You know, when you turn 21, go to bars and places that aren't necessarily looking like Blarneys and Smokes. Like, I loved being able to go to the neighborhood when I had, got 21. I love going downtown to Center City and just living life and just doing different things that was not the reality of Smokes and Blarneys and City Tap House and places that I could never eat, that had god-awful food, that downtown life was just so much better. So anywho, just recognize that you're not just only in Penn, you're in Philadelphia, there's also more things going on.
So I actually think this is a beautiful transition to our next question, kind of like looking at life outside of and after Penn. What do y'all think, or like, what do you look for in a workplace to ensure it was safe? And we can start with you, Ernest.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess a little radical. I have my own company, so I don't really work in a news environment like anymore. I worked at Comcast like right when I graduated for 5 seconds and was like, that's not for me. And then just went head on to professional freelance journalism, and then created my own business where I work with media companies, but I don't work for them in the same types of environments. Now, granted, I'm blessed and privileged to have that experience. But one of the things that I look at my partner, he is very much so, he works for the African American Chamber of Commerce, he works for a corporate space. But one of the things that we look for is being in affirming environments, looking at the values of the managers and the people you work with. Do they acknowledge Pride Month? Do they have sensitivity trainings for racism, homophobia, transphobia, and those things? Do they have these things up front? Are there other people there that look like you? Are there other people that have similar experiences? Because what I don't want for specifically Black and brown people, LGBTQ people, what I don't want us to do is be those tokens in those places where we have to educate everyone and have to do that extra labor. And mind you, we don't get compensated for that, but being in environments where you don't be singled out. I think I spent a lot of time at Penn being the only Black person in this club and being the only queer person in this group. And I think I'm tired of those things. I don't want to be that anymore. And I think what I want to encourage people is working in places where you're feeling safe and affirmed is a lot better than being the only person or the first person in this particular department or office. Because what I've learned over the years from my colleagues and my friends is that there was that. I'm the only Black person here. I'm the only queer person here. And people thought that was hot. And then you realize that that ain't necessarily what it's cracked up to be. So I'm more leaning towards telling people, go places where you're gonna, be able to have affinity, feel safe, feel included, have peers, have things already there as much as possible. Sometimes it may not be your first job, but strive to get to that place is what I encourage people. And for me, that's what made me, navigate the media industry that way. Because we all know most of the media industry is cis-het white men. That's most of the industry, still is. And what I have loved working independently is that I'm able to have the safe space working from home, working from my co-office to do that. So I just say go places where you're going to be affirmed, where you're going to be safe, first and foremost, because that's the most important thing, I think.
What about you, Aaron?
I again echo a lot of the Ernest's sentiments. I think particularly what he said about being the first at things. I think Penn, like going to an Ivy League school, doing college applications, that's kind of encouraged. You're encouraged to be a trailblazer. You're encouraged to be this this person who is like unafraid and unhindered by these challenges. And I think in large part we are. I think people of color, people of LGBTQ backgrounds, all those people are trailblazers always. But I think one of the big things that I learned in my adult life is that you don't owe that trailblazing to anybody. You don't owe that, like you don't have to put on this appearance of being bulletproof that I think is a little bit encouraged while you're at Penn. There is a sense of like fierce competition that you don't want, and a little bit of cutthroatness at Penn, especially at Penn. So I think that one of the big things is learning to let go of that. And if a job or an environment does not provide a welcoming attitude to you, then you don't have to go. You don't need to be the one trying to change people's opinions, because I think in large part, a lot of people's opinions don't end up changing that much. And you're just kind of fighting this uphill battle for the rest of your life. I think that I was fortunate enough to work in an industry that is also based in the largest LGBTQ like hub in the world, I'd say. The Bay Area has been super, like it's normalized. It's so weird how much normalizing makes a difference. I think you go to Penn and you see on campus a lot of white heteronormative people, and you go to San Francisco and it feels like everyone is kind of queer. And that's it's just different how that changes people's minds about things. Like it's automatically assumed that you can just introduce your pronouns at most companies. It actually looks terrible for you as a company if you have a culture of like not being accepting. So I think that I got a little lucky there and I picked a good city for that. But I think that's becoming more and more true of our country in general, is that it's becoming a little bit more and more embarrassing to hold on to those old values of just heteronormative, straight, white, cis people. I think that the number one biggest advice I could give, I think that has impacted my career the most, is finding a mentor who will advocate for you. I think that that's just like your boss has to advocate for you. I can't stress enough how damaging it is to your career to have someone who just won't advocate for you, who doesn't really, who's more interested in like promoting themselves than they are their team. You get stuck in an environment like that and you will just be like handicapped for the start of your career. I think it's so different to have an uplifting environment, one that isn't trying to tear you down, kind of see how you fall, and always trying to make sure like to check each other and like that, but rather an environment that kind of uplifts you and wants to see how high you can go and wants to make sure that you're hitting your maximum potential. I think that's usually you'll have an interview with your direct manager who you will be directly reporting to, and I think that's a key interview that you have to kind of nail, just to see if this person is going to be advocating for you.
Thank you so much, Aaron. We just have one more quick question before we swing it over to the live interactive Q&A. So our last question, sort of away from the workplace and maybe back to university life a little bit. Ernest, when applying to graduate school, how did you evaluate if it would be a safe and supportive environment? Or how did you find a mentor?
Well, so my program is a distance learning program. I'm in a USC program at Annenberg School of Communications, and my master's is in communication management. And, you know, before people think I was trading, I love Annenberg program at Penn. We have the best communications program. It's doctoral and undergraduate only. There's no master's program at our school. So someone should tell Dr. John Jackson to speed up that master's program at Annenberg. He's an incredible scholar and someone I look up to. So I applied to USC on the West Coast because I really want to get a master's in the field, and it was the most prestigious one of it all, and it was another Annenberg school, and I really loved what they're doing over there. What made me apply for the program was that it was a distance learning program. So before the pandemic even happened, I was already taking classes virtual, and I loved how it was, you know, not there weren't set dates or what it was anchronomous or whatever type of learning. And I love the fact that because of that, I had the flexibility, because one of the things is that I was very frustrated about sometimes in learning at Penn was that a lot of the times it was the personal interactions with other students that sometimes made learning difficult. And for me, it was sometimes frustrating. And so I loved being in classes that had more students that looked like me. I did better in classes with kids that looked more like me. I was better in classes that were smaller. And I was also felt, you know, like in classes where people valued it. And so I loved about being in a master's program in general was that when you're in that level, most of the people there have had work experience, professional development. And so everyone's in there like, look, we're here to get a master's. We're not trying to one up each other and like this intellectual measuring contest of egos, which kind of happens in undergrad. Everyone wants to be the smartest or think they're the smartest. And in reality, we should all take a step back and say, well, darn, if we're all here, we all must have some level of intelligence, especially the first generation students, because my goodness, I mean, what do we have to get us in there? We weren't legacies. I mean, I think we're the smartest people at Penn, in my opinion. But we, master's programs, you don't really deal with it on that type of level. I mean, there's always those people, but you're there to really learn. And I was really excited because I was in this program, I was able to really just learn from my peers. They was able to learn from me. And I just felt more confident in the academic space in this way in the master's program than I ever felt at Penn because of just the way that people made presumptions. And also too, master's programs are driven more by application versus theory. And that was a very big difference to me versus at Penn. Penn is a very research institution, which I love and I think is great. But I sometimes think that people don't recognize the difference between learning styles. So some people are driven more by application versus theory. One of the things that I think Penn could do a better job at, and what I've been recommending in media and in communications at Penn, is that there should be more internship and career opportunities and conversations for students in certain fields that are not driven by just keep on going and get a PhD or just keep getting more degrees in that kind of way, but more so getting people to apply what they're learning in a real way. So that's something that I definitely have learned from my particular program, and would encourage more students that when you graduate from undergrad, don't just jump into a master's program unless it's something like law school or med school, and something that you're really passionate about. Don't just go into it. It took me 5 years to figure out exactly what program I wanted to do and why. But get that work experience, get some breather space. I always tell people the joke. I say with a Penn degree, let that rock a little bit. Let that do some things for you before you feel like you have to go out and get something else, because there's some value in a Penn degree and there's some openings and opportunities that come from it compared to other universities. So I would just say, anybody who's pursuing a master's degree that's not necessarily something like a law degree or a med school degree, take some time to work a little bit, unpack some of your thoughts, unwind yourself from the Penn atmosphere, because there is a Penn bubble. Bust that bubble, live a little, and then figure out for yourself, okay, with this life experience, with this work experience, what do I want to pursue next? And that's what helped me get to my master's program.
Awesome. Thank y'all both so much for sharing. It looks like we're coming to the end of this part of our program. So now we're going to be responding to audience questions. So if you guys have any questions, just drop them in the chat box. But one question that someone asked was specifically for Ernest. So this person asked, how did you deal with if at all, homophobia in the Black Penn community?
Well, I will definitely say that a lot of it wasn't blatant, if that makes sense. Like I could count on my hands how many times I heard slurs, but there were definitely social dynamics. I think, for example, the idea of doing Greek life was just not happening, and that's still a problem. Not just at Penn, but nationwide. So the idea of even doing Greek life was nearly impossible. Most of the men that I knew who pursued Greek life were in the closet until after they crossed, and then people would say, well, they do have people, and it's like no, because there was a silence that people were expecting, and that was across the. I mean, that was happening in other fraternities and sororities, but mostly in fraternities, and that was happening not even just in Black Greek-led organizations, but others. But that was one aspect. The other aspect was just like parties and social events, who was being marketed. And, I would encourage some people to go through archives and look up my radical experiences at Penn. It was very well documented, some of the radical things I did on campus, and I was quite a badass, and I'm proud to say that now, because I was on the right side of history. But at the time, there was only a few of us that were out on campus. I do hear that there's a larger Black and brown LGBTQ community. But we were only, you could count your fingers how many of us were out and, out and proud. And we would go to these parties and be our full authentic selves. And it wasn't easy. And you're talking, and I think one of the things that we need to talk about or, think about is intersectionality and how our programming, even on student programming for Black affinity groups and even other groups, did not incorporate LGBTQ queer experiences and Black experiences in the same mix. It was always an isolated thing. I was always forced to be like, okay, you're gay, you need to go to the LGBT center. And I'm like, yeah, but that may not be my safe space. And so I was always put in positions. And I think sometimes the best thing about Penn, the worst thing about Penn is that we're very customary. Like Penn loves to customize everything. We have a vegan option. We have a kosher option. We have a kosher dining hall. We have a dining hall with red meat. We have a dining hall with seafood. I mean, Penn loves to customize everything. And that's the one of the best things about Penn, but it's also one of the worst things about Penn, because a lot of times there's a lot of institutional segregation where we don't really bring people together. One of the things I hated on campus was that I was always said, we don't know what to put you in the student leader thing. Are you a Black student leader? Are you LGBTQ student leader? I'm like, I'm a damn student leader. I'm both. And a lot of times, if you look at the politics of Penn, Penn loves to, tokenize, say, this is the queer student leader, and we're going to give them this queer award. And this is the Black student leader because they're over a Moja. And this is the La Casa Latina student group. This is the Latinx student leader. Like, we love to create that, but there was so much intersectionality between gender and identity and wealth and things. And so I would just say, for all student leaders, like, let's push back against some of that excessive pigeonholing and separation. Like, really, let's get more intersectional. And I fought against a lot of that when I was on Penn's campus. And I think a lot of students are doing that more, but I really would like the institutions to really be mindful about how we pigeonhole communities, because there are more intersections than separation.
Thank you so much. So for our next question, that was also submitted, it's, Aaron, you can start with it, but the question is, when being a trailblazer, how do you balance standing up for what you believe and the emotional labor that comes along with that when things are so personal to your own identity? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think that you have to stand up for yourself more than anything else. I think advocating for yourself is pretty key in that. So I think that there is definitely a balance between, hey, if I don't do this, then nobody will. And if I do this, it may improve my community a little bit more. Maybe it's worth the effort, right? I don't really have a good way to like measure that with an easy way to measure that. But I think my advice would be that people are more receptive to it than you would imagine, but for different reasons. I think that at work, people are professional. People are going to, most people don't really want to risk losing their job over something like this. And so I think that that's one of the things that you can expect, that people aren't going to get in your way that often. They're not gonna like deliberately, the majority of people won't deliberately get in the way. And so, and that could backfire sometimes. It can sometimes feel like the loudest people in the room, the loudest dissenters are the only opinions. And I think that one of the techniques that you're going to have to pick up is to understand that that's not representative of the entire community. What you're likely facing is just the loudest voice in the room. And I think that as a trailblazer, you're well equipped and used to dealing with loud voices in the room. So I think that is one of the like, don't hold back. You don't have to be cordial to those people, I think.
Yeah, I agree with what Aaron said, and they make some really great points. I also would just add to just read the room. And what I mean by that is just that, every space and every moment doesn't, you have to have some self-preservation, because as people of color, as LGBTQIA people, we are often expected to do so much emotional labor, but there's no one oftentimes having our backs. There's no one oftentimes providing us that pillow or that counsel. And so we give so much of ourselves to causes. And it just makes me think about a good friend of mine. We talk about mental health on Penn's campus, and oftentimes, ignore how often that impacts specifically FGLI individuals. And, I recently lost a really close friend of mine who's been in the industry, a Black trans woman named Monica Roberts, who passed away. And it was, a very unfortunate situation involving mental health. And one of the things that I think about in her death and others that I've known is that there is oftentimes this expectation for people like us to put on. You always have to be that performative boost of sunshine. You have to give people life. You have to do all of these things to stand out, to get accolades, to be seen. And oftentimes when we're putting ourselves on all the time, when we do have those things that piss us off or make us upset, we are so tired and exhausted and oftentimes not checked in on, that we often get into a dark place. And I've seen that happen with some of my friends. And so in this limelight of trailblazerness and all of these things, I just want people to take some time for themselves to set their own boundaries. And I've looked at myself over the years and have taken time to say to myself, you know what? I don't have to always be the strong person. I don't always have to be I call myself the Apple app, where there's an app for that. I don't have to always be the app in the room where it's Ernest. What do you know about this, Ernest? And I don't always have to answer or find the answer. Sometimes I'm just like, no, I'm good. I don't know. Or I just take that time to myself. And so I've learned to, really take some time to value myself and not have to be. And I think we put that pressure isn't necessarily self-inflicted, but it's also just the environments we're in, because we feel like we have to have the burden of every person before us and every generation before us. And sometimes we get that pressure inserted on us at Penn by a lot of our mentors or people who have been in the industry, where they say, you need to be grateful and you have to show this gratitude for this opportunity. And it's very important, right? It is important to be first generation, all those things. But you also have to make sure that you're recognizing that this does not fall solely on your behalf and your responsibility. And it isn't your responsibility to lift it all by yourself. And so you got to give yourself that give and take, because if you don't, you fall in the situation where you're exhausted, where you're not able to be your best self. And then you know, if you're not able to be your best self, what good are you up to anything? And so I always tell people, just read the room, take some time to yourself, and establish healthy boundaries. You know, it's always going to be a new opportunity to do something great. Sometimes you need that time to recharge and recenter.
Thank you so much. So we're coming down to the end of our program, and we just have one last very quick question. Ernest and Aaron, can any of our participants reach out to you on Penn Flash if they have any follow-up questions or questions that we didn't get to ask today? Yes.
Sure, I'm going to create an account ASAP.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm
great.
available. I'm always available. People know where to
Yeah.
find me on social
Thanks.
and everything too. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah,
Aaron?
and I have an account. Feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to help.
Great. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. So thank you both for joining us here today, and also thank you to all of our participants for being here. We invite all students to check us out and get more involved with FGLI. And you know, FGLI is for first generation low income students who also identify as queer. And for alums who are here with us today, we have Penn Gala here, which is our LGBTQ alumni association. And you can learn more by clicking on the link that we'll send in our follow-up.
And special thanks to our partners, Lambda Grads, the FGLI program, and Penn First Plus alumni. Also, the LGBT Center is hosting an event later today at 3 p.m. entitled What to Wear, a conversation about professional attire for those who do not subscribe to the gender binary. So be sure to check that out later today. And I'll hand it off to Lizette to close us off.
Thank you, Cam, James, Ernest, and Aaron. Everyone was incredible and insightful. Special thanks to our student moderators, who I wish I could, you know, get everyone to give them a round of applause or send that little icon. So we want to invite everyone to join Penn Flash, and we'll be sending an email with all of these links. And we hope to see you there. I would love to hand it over to Toys, who will close us off. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I just want to, if someone could put the Penn Flash into the chat. I'm also putting my email there. Students, Ernest, he mentioned in his segment about reaching out for support, so I can be a source of support. I don't claim to have all the answers, I don't, but I know people that do and can connect you to those. So please, my email is there in the chat. And before we close, I'd like to bring on Valerie DeCruz, and everyone's familiar with her. I just want her to come on and say hello before we end our final thing. Valerie?
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry that my video's not on. I'm having a little bit of problem with connectivity, but I want to say that this has been, I have been on so many, countless events and calls and programs, and Ernest and Aaron, this has been one of the most insightful sessions. The amount of sage advice that each of you have provided in just this little time, I'm taking away to share with students. I really want to echo what Ernest says. Go to the archives and look up the things he has written along the way. They have just been so illuminating. He pushed back at the institution on so many accounts. We are a better place because of Aaron and Ernest. Aaron, your insights about the workplace, about being who you are, not taking on more than you really are, have the bandwidth for. Both of you talked about that. I think that is so key. I want to thank you for saying yes to us, and I hope you will consider coming on again to talk to different audiences. So thank you very, very much, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, Valerie. Again, thank you, Ernest, Aaron, James, and Kim, and for everyone behind the scenes doing this. Everyone, have a safe day. Enjoy yourself, and don't forget to smile. All right. Thank you, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.